So let's talk about transgenderism in the Western world. But before we talk about transgenderism in the Western world, let's think about the Far East. China, Japan. Japan handles their population control in a different way because everybody is career oriented, don't really have time for children. It's a small island, can't really overpopulate when you've only got a finite amount of resources. So people usually work for a living, not a lot of people reproduce. Few of them do. Same happens in Korea, both North and South. Most people in North Korea don't reproduce because they know their children are going to just end up in a gulag or something. And why would you want to have a kid working in a prison colony just because they said the wrong word one day at school? There's no incentive to have kids in North Korea. China had the one child policy for years, and because it was a one child policy, Chinese people were like, "Well, we better only have boys because they'll carry on our family name," and they forgot, to be able to reproduce, you need to have girls. So China only recently, like 10 years ago, was like, "Okay, you can have two kids. Don't drown your daughters in the river because we need girls to reproduce." So that was their form of population control. And then you get to the West, free countries, quote unquote, that have constitutions that make limiting the amount of people that can reproduce eh, illegal. And that's why where transgenderism comes in. Teaching this gay transgender ideology, because that's the only way transgenders can reproduce. They don't reproduce with each other. They have to draw other people into their cult. They don't just reproduce other transgender people because that's not even physically possible. So the West is using a basically what is called a psyop, psychological operation to feed into the schools and the children's minds that being transgender and is cool as a form of population control. Now you'd be like, but there's no reason to do that. We live in a free country, blah, blah. Well, even the free countries have a finite amount of resources and a finite amount of money. And while the very rich people stay the same number, the really, really poor people are starting to balloon. Like the really poor people are starting to get outrageously huge, while only a few people have the cash, especially in America. And people are starting to get resentful of that. How do you stop that? Population control. You start to tr- fuck with kids' minds, and you have teachers go into schools and be like, being transgender and everything. Oh, I'm a pride flag. That's why pride went from a parade to a month to like almost every day. It's a psyop because the government can't legally tell you, well, you're only allowed to have one kid because we live in a free country and the Constitution won't allow it. The only way the Constitution would allow it is if all the states were on board and voted for it to be an amendment in the Constitution. In which case, I'd be on board too. I think that's a much more logical way to go about it, like making birth control, Planned Parenthood, abortion, all of that, turning it into a government. Like, you have to get a psychological test. You have to prove you're financially sound. You have to prove you're a citizen of the United States. You have to prove all these things to be able to have a kid in the United States. Otherwise, it's not a citizen and it can be deported. And you can only have 3 kids tops. Your license only lasts for 3 kids. After that, you're done. So that means the people that don't get the license either get forced abortions or their kids get deported, meaning if you still want to have anything to do with your kid, you better follow it to wherever we send it. And if you have 3 kids and then you go for a fourth, you pass the limit. You can get fined, charged. You already proved you're a good parent, but you will get extra fines for having a fourth kid. That takes the poorer homeless people that are fucking in the streets of Oakland and San Francisco, shitting and pissing in the streets, who are fucking each other and getting pregnant just so they could have benefits from welfare. That means no, you're either going to get a forced abortion or we're going to deport your child to wherever we choose. Might be the middle of the ocean, and you've got to follow it if you want to be a part of its life. Or you could fucking get a job. That's a better form of population control than this transgender bullshit. But nobody's going to vote for that, so that ain't happening. Nobody's looking at the math. The bell curve is starting to turn into a spike when it comes to rich to poor. It used to be a bell curve, the law of averages. Well, now the bell curve is becoming everybody's poor and then you're rich, and like we need to fix that, definitely. But we also need to get rid of this transgender bullshit, this LGBTQ bullshit. Even the LGB people don't agree with how far the trans people are pushing it. I'm I'm not calling you by your pronouns. I don't know you. You're not my friend. I don't know who you are. But when I look at you, I could tell you're a fucking man, and that's what it's going to be. And you're the ones that get violent about it and call me a fascist. You're the ones that are fighting and getting angry and getting violent and calling everybody fascists when you're the ones that are actually acting like fascists. And you're the smallest. Like, do you think the Germans, like, if the Jews started acting, and the Jews in Germany were like 30% of the population? The LGBTQ community is like what 2-3% of the population. Do you really think if the Jews acted like how you do today, they wouldn't have been persecuted? 30% of the population was wiped out, sent to prisons. You are like 3% of the population. You're not going to last very long. You got maybe 10 more years to ride this roller coaster, and it's going to be done. The TikTok trend is going to be done. The people in schools are going to be rooted out. You're all going to lose your jobs, and God forbid, lose your lives. So figure it out now, because that's what's coming for you. The world's future is not gay, because there's no future in that, because you people don't fuck each other and create babies. You rely on straight people to create babies for you. So, that being said, have a wonderful night.